All right, my Renowned fam, welcome back to the Renowned Leadership Podcast. And I am honored and privileged to have today's guest with me. His name is Kyle Gillette, and he is the Dadpreneur. So, first of all, Kyle, welcome. Second of all, Kyle, what in the heck is a Dadpreneur?
Hey, thanks, Stephen, for letting me be on your show. I really appreciate it. What's a dadpreneur? Dadpreneur is a man that loves his kids, loves his family, but loves his work too, loves his business, and wants to serve both as well as they possibly can, and wants to keep that all in balance in a way that fits his lifestyle and the lifestyle of his family while honoring everything in between. And that's tough to do, but that's what a dadpreneur is.
It's funny because one of my big pet peeves, one of the things I hate most in the world is when people say, oh, I got to find a good work-life balance. Because I don't believe in balance. I think balance is a myth. Something has to be sacrificed so something else can succeed, whether that's you choose life, great, okay, then your professional journey is going to take a sacrifice. Or if you choose your professional endeavor, then your life is going to have to take a sacrifice. I think in my professional history, it's okay. But I also come from the military where it's all sacrifice. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a course called Balance. It's BALANCE, and it's 7 different things. It'll take too long to explain. But one of the main things, the first things I say in the intro is, this isn't about 50-50. This isn't about creating the balance that I want in my life. It's about creating the balance that you want. And when I refer to the word balance in that course, and also just in conversation, it could be 30-70, right? For a season, your family focus is 30 and your business focus is 70. And then for a different season, it's 60-40 or whatever. It doesn't, the actual percentages don't matter. It's, are you in the balance that you want to have? And that's the way that I look at it, right? Because for a dadpreneur, for men in business, they're going to be pursuing their business really hard for some seasons and then taking some time away from it for other seasons, or at least I really hope they do, so that they can have that, they have the ability to build up one area and then build up the other area, just like you're saying, right? You got to lean into one area in order to build that area up. And the hope is that in that area of life, as you build that up, the others kind of come with it a little bit. But you got to let it go to get over here, because we don't have 25, 30 hours in a day to focus on everything.
Boy, I wish we did, though.
then we'd want 40 in a day, right? It would never end.
I could really use that extra hour, man.
It's true.
I really could. But I mean, so do you think most people, when they think work-life balance, though, they have that misconception that it needs to be 50-50?
I don't think so. I think those that are actually attempting to get it realize that, but those that are just talking about it but have never really tried to pursue it or really help other people pursue it, they put it at this balancing point of 50-50, like the scales that you see depicted. It's just 100% not realistic. It's not.
No, not at all. Especially if you own your own business, it's definitely 100% not realistic. It's just not possible. You'll go out of business.
No, and the way I see it, there's 7 different areas of my life that I focus on. So you need to divide that 100% by 7 to get more to the reality of where things are, because each one of those areas needs significant attention. And so one of those 7 areas might only be at a 5% sometimes, because I just cannot give it the attention that it needs. And that's life.
Right, exactly.
That's choice. We got to make choices.
What are your 7 areas?
Yeah, so they're emotional, financial, spiritual, relational, educational, vocational. I always forget one. And did I say financial? Financial, yes. If I didn't say that. Okay, I forgot one. Physical. There we go. Yeah. My first book was based on those 7 areas and creating a map for your life for each of those 7 areas for where you want to be. So
awesome. So I think people, I think it's funny. because I think people look at, you know, trying to think of his name. Tony Robbins, is that his name? Real big guy. Yeah,
Yeah,
Tony Robbins. I think people look at him, hear what he has to say, and they're like, yeah. But then, like when they try to get into these new fads, what and I say Tony Robbins just because he's the only one I really know. But they try to get into like these fad motivational self-improvement things, and it's so, I think where they fall short is they make these things so freaking complicated, right? Like, because one of the things I like about your seven is when you said seven, my first thought was that's too many, it's too complicated. But then when you listed them, it's like, oh, that's basic function, like it's pretty easy. But you get the five pillars of leadership: integrity, self-improve. Like you get all these, you get the 36 principles that'll change your life, or the 1,382 rules or thoughts that you should have every single day. It's just too much, man. It's too complicated. So, and I think I'm pretty sure you're going to be like, yeah, 100%, especially when it comes to entrepreneurs or dadpreneurs. You got to simplify as much as you possibly can. You got to automate and simplify, because otherwise you're never going to find balance anywhere, because your business is going to require 100% of your attention.
I agree. Yeah, you do. There's a acronym that I learned years ago now. It's EPAD, and it's eliminate, prioritize, automate, and delegate. And that's something
Boom.
that I'm like, I totally agree with that. I identify with that. And it's actually a process that I walk through I think it's like fourth Saturday or something. I do an EPAD on my life. And I go, what do I need to eliminate? What do I need to prioritize, automate, and delegate? And it's been effective. It's been really good. And the thing is, even in that process, I come up with a bunch of things and I can't do them all, but I have a record of it, and then I can pursue them going forward over time.
Right.
So it's I agree. There's so many things that come thrown our way as it relates to motivation and tactics and strategies, and you got to pick and choose the ones that are best for you, that fit within your personality and your behavior sets already. And then if you want to modify in some way, shape, or form, then you can, but you got to just implement the ones that already fit you. And in my opinion, you got to start with what works already, start with your strengths, as they say, and then modify a little bit of the other things that are a little bit more tied to your weaknesses, the areas where you need to grow.
Right. So, and I think that that's a good segue into talking about your book that just came out, which would make a good addition to the New Year's, because we're going to have the New Year's here in a couple of days. So, talk a little bit about your book and where it fits into that, as far as developing the leader you want to be.
Yeah. So right now, leadership is about the mindsets and habits of leaders that they can implement right now. So there's several different mindsets and habits in there, but you're not going to implement all of them because they're not all a good fit for people. But there are a bunch of these mindsets and habits that I've seen great leaders implement, that I've implemented some of them in my life, and I teach my clients. And the beauty of every one of them is you can choose to implement them right now. So a good example would be what I call the journaling habit. And a lot of people, this is tied to self-awareness. And this is something that some men struggle with, but it is absolutely beautiful. When I was 16, struggling with women in my life, I had a pastor friend of mine like, "Hey, do you journal?" And I'm like, "No." And he said, "You should journal." So from when I was 16 to now, I've been journaling. So 20 plus years I've been journaling, and it has completely changed my life. And there's something about taking your thoughts from 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional that is just empowering. And what I mean by that is you take your thoughts, and usually when we have our thoughts, we have this dialogue between our conscious mind and the voice in our head, right? And we're just having this dialogue. But when you put it on paper, you get a third voice in there, which is like this other perspective that's kind of outside of yourself, even though you're looking at your own words. So you have that dialogue and you write it down, and then you get to look at it from this new perspective of, oh, oh, that's what I wrote down. I guess I don't have to be so pissed off at my wife, or I don't have to be so frustrated with this employee, or my daughter doesn't have to annoy me as much as I thought. Right. And so that third angle on it by putting it down on paper is absolutely huge. So journaling would be a good example of a habit that you can implement right now. And there's no excuse not to do it because it's easy. You just start. And
Yeah.
all the habits and mindsets are very similar to that. You can do them right now, and it will help your leadership right now.
So it's funny you bring journaling up because I am an avid journaler.
Okay. Yeah.
I love journaling, and like you, I started journaling early in my military career. Whenever I or when I was given charges for the first time, I wanted to ensure that I was doing everything right. So I just started keeping a log, basically, of my day to day, trying to identify traits in myself, traits in my team, things like that. But and then that just led to full on journaling. And I just gave a talk last night about journaling to a
Huh.
group of people, and the importance of it. And it is the very first thing I try to get all my clients to do is to start journaling. And men, I would say about 80 to 85% of my male clients absolutely refuse because they have like this negative idea of like it needs to be like this purple binder book with a pink heart-shaped locket with a purple butterfly key, and that's not it at all. I think, and the way I explained it last night in my talk was it's like a Picasso painting, right? Like you write all this stuff down, and just like with a Picasso painting, you got to study it and you got to learn it, and then you start to understand what the actual image you're looking at is. Journaling is the exact same thing. You're painting this picture of whatever aspect you're writing about in your life, and you get to sit there and study it and pull things from it, and like you said, learn like this is working, this is not. And a lot of times now I identify things that are broken before I ever feel the effects of them being broken, because I just have such a strict habit of journaling. And like you said, it takes no effort. In the beginning, it's uncomfortable. In the beginning, it's a little hard. What do I write about? But, or, how do I write it or whatever? But eventually you're going to learn. Stick with it for a month and it's going to be autopilot from there. And, 5 minutes. That's all it takes. That's literally all I spend. 5 minutes. And it's like you said, the most valuable thing I've done in my life, hands down. And it blows my mind. People don't bat an eyelash at dropping $36,000 to hire me to coach them or mentor them, and they don't want to spend their most valuable resource, which is literally pennies on the dollar compared. It's 5 minutes. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? Like people just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Why?
100. I don't know. I think there's this association with feminine. It's like feminine journaling is a feminine thing, and they think diary or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then there's this resistance. One of the ways that I use it is I write. Obviously, you can do a gratitude journal, but what I've done is taken the things that my kids have done or my wife has done or character traits about them, and every morning I write down one thing that I'm grateful for about them as a person. And sometimes that's a sentence, sometimes that's multiple sentences, but every time for the last 190 something days, however many days we've had in the year so far, that's what I write down. And it's really, really powerful because I've shifted my attitudes towards all my kids. I have three daughters, and towards my wife as well. So now when I look at them, the first things that come to mind for me is, what am I grateful for about this kid or my wife? Not every time. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I'm just irritated at any of them, and that's usually my fault. But there's something about having this archive of all these things. You're like, wow, my wife is wonderful. All these attributes about my kids are wonderful. These are beautiful children, and it changes your perspective on them when you are frustrated because you start to remember things about them. So that's been really helpful for me. And I'm debating whether I'm going to make little books for them and print them out and give them to them after the new year. So we'll see if I'm gonna do that or not. I don't know, because I've been somewhat vulnerable in there, and so I'm not sure if they're ready for it. But I'm thinking about making little printed out journals of what I actually wrote to them. So
It's funny. So I got my dad for his birthday a couple of years ago. My dad's 73. So he's getting older. And of course, you never know when your final day is. So I got my dad this awesome a genuine leather bound journal with what's that thick yellowish paper called? You know what I'm talking about? It's almost like cardboard.
I'm
But
sure I've had my hands on it before. Yeah.
that's the paper that's in it. It was like $70. It's a nice journal.
Like a
Um,
canvas almost.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really cool journal. And I even had to get like a special pen for it. But anyway, I got it from my dad and I gave it to him. I'm like, look, I know I'm probably the most difficult son in the history of the world because I'm 40 years old and I still argue with him. I know he's the smartest man ever, but I still argue with him. And don't hardly ever do what he tells me to do. And I was like, take this journal and I want you to write everything you wish you had told me and everything you see me struggling with in the future, or anything you just think of that you want me to know that I might not. And I was like, just keep doing it until it's either full or until you die. And then I get it whenever you're gone. And he had it filled up in like 2 months, I think.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, like, but I think it's funny. I got a 72 or 73-year-old man to journal, right? And it's all in context, man. It's so powerful. And imagine the effect it's going to have on me when he does unfortunately pass
Right.
and move
Yeah.
on. Like that's gonna be one of the most valuable resources I have in my life, right? It's one of the last things I got from my dad. So yeah, I love journaling. Other than journaling, what are other good strategies or techniques for entrepreneurs slash dadpreneurs to implement and help grow and shift their mindsets?
Yeah. One of the main ones that I talk about in the empowerment section of the book is study. And what I'm referring to there is studying your people, getting to know their personality, getting to know them, like deeply understanding, well, how do they think? Are they a visual communicator? Are they an auditory communicator? Are they a kinesthetic communicator? Are they fast paced, slow paced? Do they like people or do they like tasks? Are they detail oriented? Are they more visionary? All those questions, figure that out about your spouse, about your kids, and about all the people that work with you or for you, your customers too. Figure that stuff out. Study people, because when you study people, then you can empower them, because once you know what they're good at, what their strengths are, and how they're wired, then when you find something that is a fit for them, it's really easy to give it to them, and they'll gladly accept it, whatever it is, from the most mundane things for children when it comes to chores and whatnot, to really high level challenging things in the world of business. If you know the personality type and you study the person and how they like to be communicated to, it's easy to hand off the right things to them and they will excel at it. And then that's truly empowering them. And that's something that, again, you can start today. Right now, you can just be a bit more observant about the way that people speak to you, the pace in which they speak, and what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy. All that adds up and makes a big difference.
I couldn't
I,
agree more.
I'm I'm
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I'm learning. Some of my clients are more visual communicators, and one of them's a physical therapist, and he's constantly talking in metaphors, constantly giving me metaphors to explain himself. And so then I have to interpret the metaphor and then try to bring the metaphor forward with him. Right. So one day we'll be talking about boats, another day we'll be talking about airplanes, one day we were talking about the gospel as like a metaphor of what he was going through. It's just these crazy conversations, but that's how he communicates. And so if I started speaking in a language of like feelings and hearing things, for example, it's not gonna fit him, and it's not gonna be able to help him to unlock whatever it is that he needs to work through. Right. So that it's really funny because I have a lot of fun with those metaphors with him. But it's hard work because it's not necessarily the language that I use. I like stories and I like metaphor, but it's not my natural language. And so
Right.
studying people requires the work of doing it, of doing the studying and learning, but then it also requires the work of application. Once you learn it, to start to apply that and adapting to them in those moments.
I couldn't agree more. I have a great example of that. I had an employee one time that was, for everyone else, was an absolute nightmare, but he worked flawlessly underneath me. And people would always ask me how I could get such good work out of him, such good efficiency. As because I learned how to speak his language. I learned the way he needed me to communicate to him. He was a very rough, rugged individual, and his communication was a very rough, rugged style. Well, fortunately for me, I come from the military, so I can speak rough and rugged. And so that's how I interacted with him every single day. And he flourished under that because I was communicating in his language. And you're absolutely right. We have that only comes from learning your people. I absolutely love that. So what we're talking about right now, is this part of your blue shirt framework, if I said that correctly?
Yeah, it's all tied. It's all tied together. Yep.
So can you dive a little bit deeper into what the blue shirt framework is?
Yeah. So originally, I left a men's mentoring program when I was about, how old was I? Geez, 30, roughly 30. I'd been in it for about 9 years. Played various roles, and I was helping guys in life that were lost and off track and struggling with drugs and alcohol. And I was part of the program doing various roles for right around 9 years. And during that time, I was mentored by a serial entrepreneur that had made millions of dollars, retired in his early 50s, and was running that program as his retirement plan because he had the money, so he didn't really need to make any more money. So that's
Right.
what he was doing, which is really cool. And every Tuesday for almost 9 years, we would meet for an hour and a half and have lunch together, and he would mentor me. So we'd be sitting at Tahoe Joe's. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Tahoe Joe's or not, but it's a steakhouse, a chain steakhouse. It's super yummy. The bacon blue burger is the best one in my opinion. But anyway, I'd have my bacon blue burger, and then we would just chat about what's going on with the guys, and we chat about what's going on with the pet resort because we ran a pet resort to support the program, and talk about other things. And every time he's just asking me these deep questions about life, about leadership, about my faith, about relationships, and then asking me business questions because I'm running the pet resort. And so then I'm learning about the business side of things and the personal side of things. So it all came together, a ton of mentorship. And since he had been so successful in business, I got all this wisdom and insight. Like I got the cheat code, man. It was awesome. And when my wife and I moved from there up to the Pacific Northwest to be close to her family, I wanted to bring that stuff forward along with all my experiences of running businesses and running that nonprofit and other things. I wanted to bring it forward into the work that I did. And at that time, I didn't know I wanted to run a business, but I got exposed to John Maxwell and a couple other things. And I went, wait, I could actually run a coaching business. Well, then let's go for it. So I did that. But I knew within just a couple months, I needed my own tool. I needed my own proprietary thing that I brought to the world. And so I started thinking about it. And one morning when my wife was still a nurse, she was it was like 3 a.m. So she's at work this day. And I wake up and I hear the word self-awareness. And it was like God gave me that word. And it was the word I needed to make everything click together for me. And so I jumped out of bed, just running my boxers and run to the kitchen. I'm sitting at the kitchen table shivering as I'm writing down for the next 4 hours the origin of Blue Shirt Coaching. And so what it's become is be a self-aware leader, which is the B, obviously, lead with accountability, use a growth mindset, and empower others. So those are the 4 pillars, I think, of every great leader. And if you examine great leaders and you look at how they lead, they embody those things in really amazing ways. And so that's the framework that I use with my clients. That's how I help them to move forward in their business and in their life. And that's how I help dadpreneurs in their home and in their businesses to get to where they want to be. So that's the shortened version of how it came about.
That's so cool. And I want to pull at the mentor thread a little bit. Um, did you actively seek him out as a mentor, or did it just kind of happen?
It kind of happened. I got lucky. So I went
Yeah.
to on a missions trip to India months before I started working for them. And one of the guys on the trip, he called me up afterwards and he said, "Hey, there's a job opening at this business that I work at. Would you be interested in being a mentor?" I'm like, "What are you talking about, John?" And he told me that I would live in this house with guys that are 18 to 25. Mind you, I'm 22 at this point, just fresh, like just getting ready to finish college, wet behind the ears, don't really have any sort of experience to mentor guys that are my age or older. Like, what do I have to offer? And so he tells me about it and he says I'd be a good fit. So I went for it. I said, "Okay, I'll go do the interview." So I did the interview. Hour and a half later, I'm standing in this old farmhouse that's built. It was built in 1886. It was built in 1886 and the carpets were blue. And there's this old 1980s entertainment center to my left. And I'm sitting on this ratty couch and the president's across from me. And so is the director. And we're talking about life and what this thing is and asking me a bunch of questions. And then Jack, the president, stands up and he says, "I'd like to offer you the job." I'm like, "What?" You don't usually get a job offer, or at least I never did, on the spot. Usually there's, "Oh,
Mhm.
we'll call you back later," kind of thing. What it meant though for me was I'm leaving my apartment. I'm upending my life and all the plans, the limited plans, but the plans that I had, and I'm going to live in this place for a year. And so I stand up and I say, yes, I shake his hand and I just dive full in. So that was nuts, man. That was absolutely nuts. But it was just that fortunate friend that was like, "Hey, I think there's an opportunity here for you that you'd be a good fit for." And I was afraid, but I said yes anyway. Right. And all along the way, I was afraid. I don't know if I want to do this interview. I'm not sure if I'm ready for this. I don't think I'm qualified. Man, I don't know if I could live in this house, but I said yes anyway. And those yeses were, I mean, I wouldn't be the man I am if it weren't for that experience. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, I don't want to miss the point that you said yes, because I think a lot of people will hear this and be like, well, I wish I would have an opportunity like that. And my argument to them will be, you have had those opportunities, but the difference is you said no. You got to say yes. And the way I've lived my life, almost my entire adult life, is if it scares me, that's what I'm going to go do. If I have fear, that's the sign I need to be doing that thing, whatever it is I'm scared of. And that has been so beneficial to me because, like you, it's brought me to say yes rather than say no. And it's opened so many opportunities, whether it's starting my own business, growing in the military, whatever the case was. It's about saying yes. And then for your mentor, that all that wisdom and entrepreneurial spirit, all that stuff he brought to you throughout the time he mentored you, all came from that one yes. And I don't think, again, the mentor piece though, this is for any listener. If you don't have a mentor in your life, find one, get one right now. Start, just pause this and go get one. I don't care if you have to pay for it. I don't care if it's someone you find at your church or someone you're in class with or whatever. Find a mentor because they are just so vitally important to your growth as a person. My dad is a great mentor, but I don't even consider him my mentor. He's my dad.
Right.
I have several other mentors that, some I pay, some I don't. And it's okay to pay for it, right? Like, I mean, yeah. In fact, I think it's more valuable if you pay for it.
Yeah, you tend to you buy in, right? You're buying in. You got some skin in the game, and there's something about having skin in the game. I mean, I personally right now I have a mentor and yeah, a mentor and two coaches right now. I have a coach for training, for physical training, and then I have a coach for my business, and then I have a mentor for business and personal. And like if I'm going to be a coach, I need to kind of be involved in the world of that. Like, I
Right,
better
exactly.
represent it.
Right.
So I want to mention something about the yes and no, and then I can also share a little bit of how I go about getting a mentor. And
Mhm. Yeah, I'd
there's
love that.
it's part of the accountability stuff. But when it comes to the yes and no's, recently I went through some neurolinguistic programming training, which was a really cool training. And one of the things that they talked about is they gave this kind of this, you could picture it as a tree, and you've got spirit, mind, intellect, and then physical or body, right? And when you think spirit, think like, in my case, that's God, like my connection to God. So it's outside of me. And then you've got your mind, which is, it's like your unconscious mind, and it's also the thoughts that come to you, those types of things. And then your intellect is like your conscious mind, and then finally your physical. One of the things that they said is, as you have these fears that come your way, when the spirit's saying yes, or if God's saying yes, and your mind is saying yes, and your intellect seems to be mostly saying yes, but your body is saying no, or your intellect, if one of those two is resisting it, who gives a crap? Because that's emotions, and that doesn't matter. But when the spirit pushes you and your mind is like on board, right? Then we say yes anyway, despite the emotional no or the physical no that we get. Because at the higher level, you're getting the yes is the point. And where the fear comes in is at that lower level. And at the higher level, you're going to get the confirmation that you really need. And then you can drag along the resistors, the naysayers that are within us. Right? And
I
I
love
really,
that.
yeah, I really liked it too. It made a lot of sense to me, because I've, in the past, way more frequently than now, I would say no to the things because of emotional reasons, or something that's in my body. Like you get that heart palpitation and you're like, oh, it makes me nervous. I feel
Mhm.
uncomfortable. So I'm going to just say no. Well, that's dumb. If the rest of me is saying yes, then my outside source is God is telling me yes, then I better freaking say yes, regardless of how I feel about it. So for those of us that are going, I'm not sure if I should say yes or no to something, trust that top level tier of who you are before you trust the liar that is your emotions.
Right.
Because, and your intellect can fool you into, well, the reasons why you shouldn't do it are ABC 1, 2, 3. And you're like,
Overthinking.
yeah. And that won't serve us in the long run.
Absolutely. That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I've never heard that. And that is a very interesting take. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to implement that strategy. That is really good.
And the funny thing is you've already implemented it. It's just we're naming it a little bit so that we understand what place we're at on that. Because you've said yes so many times when maybe your
I guess
emotions
that's
are
true.
like, I don't know if I should say yes here.
Well, it's funny, like I got to that, and my listeners are going to roll their eyes because they've heard this story a million times. But I got to that because I'm deathly scared of heights.
Oh yeah.
And the army made me learn to jump out of airplanes.
Yeah. Got to get over it.
And yeah, yeah. So the process of that was, and now skydiving is one of my favorite. I'm still scared of heights, but I still love to skydive. And I love to challenge myself with whether it's climbing or something like that, like because man, that first jump out of the airplane was the most liberating thing I've ever had happen to me. Not because you're falling or any of that, but or the adrenaline or any of that stuff. It's because I realized that my mind was lying to me. I have nothing to be scared of. There are things I need to take into consideration. There are dangers, yes, but if I plan for them, I can, take them into consideration. I prepare, then I'll be okay 9 times out of 10. And that one time that I'm not okay, well, there's nothing I can do about that anyway. That's life. It's going to happen. So just get over it and face your fear and step into it. And that's literally how I've chosen to live my life. And of course, I'm not perfect. And I've said no to things, at times where in hindsight, like, man, that was really stupid. But I mean, for the most part, it's never failed me. It's not failed me once of just identifying the fear and stepping into it.
100%. You mentioned jumping out of an airplane. I use that as a metaphor for how to create accountability and how to follow completely through on the things that you want to do. Can I share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I believe that when I describe blue, I use a metaphor of a house. And the idea is that being a self-aware leader, that's your foundation to your house. If you don't have self-awareness, you don't have a good foundation. You have to have that. Accountability is the nails that holds the leadership house together. Right. So if you have accountability, you've got all this, you have this beautiful architecture home, 4,000 square feet, and that's your leadership house. And it looks beautiful, but things are falling apart because the nails are popping out and you don't have that accountability in place. And so that house is going to crumble, and it's going to hurt, obviously you, but it's going to hurt everybody else that you're leading. Then the use growth mindset is the walls and the roof. Right. And as we adapt and we adjust, we move things on the inside of a home, remodel things. We also add additions to homes. Right. So that's the growth mindset of a blue leader. And then finally, you empower others. And that's the windows and doors. That's the idea that people get to see into your leadership through those windows, and they can walk into your leadership through that door. But the beauty of real empowerment is you're so confident in yourself and aware of who you are and what you're really trying to achieve for other people, that door is revolving, because people come in, they're led by you, and then at some other point they leave and they go lead other people. You're making disciples, in other words. And that's what blue leadership is about, is creating that leadership home. But the heart of it is accountability. Without that, you can't do any of the other stuff, right? You do have to start with self-awareness, but once you have that self-awareness, you have a new level of accountability. So I talk about an accountability pass, and I'll try to do this kind of quick. And it's 4 things. It's passive accountability, active accountability, structures, and self accountability. So passive is the idea of telling your story to as many people as possible. And when I say story, I don't necessarily mean like your history. You can if you want, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's more like, what goal do you have, and what's the real reason behind that goal? What's the compelling, exciting reason behind why you want to accomplish that goal? And when you tell that story to people, they become interested, obviously, because it's compelling. And your unconscious mind starts to play with that goal because you've told such a clear story, because your unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between reality and this imagined thing when it's created really well. Then it starts to go to work on making that thing real, that projection real. And the people that you tell the story to, some of them will reach out to you and ask you, hey, how's it going with that book you wanted to write, or that new business you wanted to start, or the relationship improvement you want to have with your spouse, or whatever it is. And from there, you go to active accountability, right? So I've got my brain passively helping me accomplish my dream, my goals. And I've got friends that are basically calling my integrity into question when they ask me if I've made progress, right? And so I'm like, I better stay on top of this thing. Active accountability is where you pick one of those friends and say, hey, would you be willing to meet with me on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to talk about your goals and my goals? And we'll just exchange how things are going and talk about the progress. You've made an accountability partner just like that, because most people need that. Most people don't have something like that. So when you ask someone for that and you meet with them in a coffee shop or a bar, or you meet with them over the phone or Zoom or something, you're gonna make a lifelong friend, very likely, but also you're going to make a lot of progress in the goals you're trying to achieve. Then the first S is structures. Structures is basically your to-do list and your calendar. On the to-do list, what I tell my clients is the things that you need to do to get to your goals go on your to-do list. And on the calendar goes the people that you need to interact with to accomplish your goals go on your calendar. And there's a tiny bit of overlap, but for the most part, it's the who over on the calendar and it's the what on the to-do list. And that together becomes your plan. The resources of the people over here and the resources of the things you need to accomplish over there. And that's the structures. Finally, you've got the second S, which is self-accountability. And for me, it's the idea, the difference between making a decision and making a commitment. So if you go to first skydive, you go up there and you've decided you're going to do it, and you get to elevation and they're like, okay, it's time to jump. At that point, you can decide, you're like, I don't want to do this. I'm feeling sick to my stomach. I'm going to throw up. And you can decide to quit. You got up there and you decided that you're going to jump, but then you got up there and you didn't make the full commitment. right? You didn't actually jump out of the plane. So the idea here is there is a big difference between deciding to do something and committing. And that commitment needs to be so clear that it's like jumping out of an airplane. Once you've jumped out of an airplane, you ain't crawling back in. It's over. You are falling. There's no turning back. So whatever is required of you to make that level of commitment to your goals, do that. You know, if it's symbolic, something symbolic to do to commit to your goals, then do that. For me, recently it was about a year ago now, but it was going, okay, Carrie, my wife, I want you to quit your job, which was a 6-figure job working in a hospital, so that she's not working anymore. She can be with the kids, and then I would earn the money for the business. Right? That's a freaking commitment, man. That's me saying I'm committed to this business. I'm committed to this approach, because you lose 6 figures. I don't care how much money you already make. That's a loss. That matters. And that was me jumping out of the airplane. And it's been beautiful to have jumped out of the airplane. That free fall was scary. And I'm sometimes feel like I'm still in it, but it's totally worth it. And so whatever that is for you as a listener, man, figure out what that commitment is so that there is no turning back. You have no other option but to go forward. And that creates beautiful accountability. In the middle of it, you've created at least one mentor, if not many.
Man, that is really powerful. And I think my favorite thing, like what you said was great or good. I love it. But the most powerful thing about it was quitting, because that's the other side to my coin is, and this is a God-given trait. I am the single most stubborn person um you'll ever meet in your life. And the best thing you can do for me is to make me think that you want me to quit and that you don't want me, that you don't believe in me, because all I can focus on from that point on is proving you wrong. Right. Like, so drill sergeants, like, the instructors, all of that stuff, like the harder they were on me, the more drive and just I can't quit. It's not possible for me to quit. And I understand that's a very unique trait for me. A lot of people don't have that drive. For you, where's that balance? Like, how do you for me it just comes natural, and I just can't, like, how do you find the resolve to not quit?
It's incremental, I think, is the first answer for me. I'll give you when I'm working out. Yesterday, I was working out on one of those cycle bikes that are really hard to pedal, and I had to get within a certain time, and I wanted my time to be the same for the first set of 3 rounds versus the second set of 3 rounds. And so at the very end, I'm going, okay, what's the pace I need to keep in order to have equal times? And I picked an increment. I picked a piece of the workout to focus on to make sure I maintained that. And because I maintained that, I ended up being only 1 second difference between the rounds. And I think it's that. It's what is the increments you need to focus on to continue to be moving forward. What's the increments you need to be looking at so that when it does become hard, when quit becomes a word that's possible for you, you have there's something small that you can look to focus on, right? So that's one part of it. The other side of it is, what are you trying to do? Like, what's the big picture here, right? That's that compelling story that we have to tell ourselves. What's that big compelling story that when the increment, we're in the middle of it and we're like, okay, this is what I'm focusing on right now. I'm targeted on this, but why am I doing this? Because if you're targeted and you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, you can lose motivation pretty quickly. But when you have that much broader picture of, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, right? Like, I'm trying to help men shift their mindsets and habits so that God can transform their hearts. Like, that's my target. That's huge. Thousands of lives impacted, families impacted, because these guys, they're not broken anymore. There's so many men that are broken. Then they're breaking their businesses, they're breaking their wives, they're breaking their kids. And then that lasts for generations. So that's my motivation, right? When I think about what I can do for my kids, and when I think about what I can help other men do for their families and the businesses they're leading, that motivates me. And when I get a little bit demotivated, I can look back to that, but I can also pick that little increment of improvement to focus on, a little thing I can do to accomplish that part of the goal to get me way out here. So that needs to be in front of you, though. Has to be, that big thing needs to be in front of you all the time. Literally, written up on the wall. So
Uh, so I don't even know where to start, man. So recently, I have, renowned leadership. Obviously, I focus on leadership. Leadership is my jam. I can nerd out on leadership all day long. I can talk to you about what it means. I can talk to you about different styles. I can, dude. But I've learned through working with clients and studying the habits of people and people in general, um, that leadership isn't necessarily what they're lacking in. What I've learned is purpose is what they're lacking in. Their purpose does not align with what they're doing. And most people, they don't even know what their purpose is. So everything you just said is you have to, and I'm summing this up in my own words. Correct me if I'm wrong. You have to go look at yourself hard in the mirror, look deep into your soul, and figure out why you're on this earth. And it's uncomfortable and it hurts to do this. But once you figure out your purpose, you can align your life, your relationships, your career, your everything to your purpose. And when everything becomes aligned with your purpose and your why, and your goals are aligned with your purpose, you become an unstoppable force that can just wreck every obstacle that gets put into your way. And I realized this because when I left the Army, I was in the Army for 16 years. I left in 2017 and I was miserable. I was depressed. I gained a whole bunch of weight. Um, and I gained 80 pounds in 10 months. Not healthy.
wow.
Yeah. And I realized now that it's because I completely lost my purpose. I had no purpose anymore. And now the reason I'm so energetic, I'm so driven, I'm so hyper focused, I'm everything that I am now. It's because now I know my purpose again, and everything is aligned to my purpose or with my purpose. And I love that, dude. Like, I love what you said, man. So powerful. You gotta, man. And about the little nugget, like, definitely you got to count the small wins. I hate it. It's such a pet peeve of mine when people are like, oh, dude, I just made a $50. Like, yeah, you made
Right.
$50 in 10 minutes, man. Like, that's a lot of money. Like,
Right. And if we want to bring this all full circle, when you journal about that, and then you look
right.
back on that, it's a beautiful thing because we often forget, especially men, we forget where we've come from, how much progress we've made, and how much we beat the crap out of our own self. And when you look back and go, wow, that's what I was struggling with 6 months ago, 3 months ago, and you're not anymore. You're done with it. You've overcome it. Like, this is the stuff that breaks men when we don't see it, when we forget to remind ourselves of all the progress we've made, even in a short time period. And if you rewind a year or so and you're looking back on your history, my goodness, like, as long as you're focused on growing, then you're gonna grow. Like,
Mhm.
and I mean, we're gonna get going here again with another topic, but I just want to encourage people, yes, journal, but also measure. Like when I mentioned the bike, I was going for a 63. The cadence was a 63, which isn't that fast, but that's what I needed to get to accomplish the goal. And because I measured it, I'm growing in it. If you don't measure it, it's a lot harder to grow in it because you don't know your progress. And a journal
Right.
serves as a way to measure your progress. So I'll be quiet, but
Nah, man, that's good stuff. And oh man, I had a question and it just right out of my head. What was I gonna ask? So whenever you oh man, it's like right there at the edge of my brain and it won't come out. I don't know. Say something incredible while I think about this. I can't.
well, one of the things
Oh,
we haven't talked about is in leadership, the necessity of listening.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A lot of people think leadership is talking. and telling. And I know you and I are both doing a lot of telling and talking right now, but primarily great leadership is listening at these incredible levels. And one of the things that I talk about in the book, not as much as I probably should have, but I talk about the power of listening. But it's something that I bring to my clients often, and that is, are you creating space for the people in your life to truly think? Are you creating space for the people in your life to think without interruption? And it's something that we really harp on in our home, is not interrupting one another. We eat dinner at the table every night, and
Love that.
often we'll eat breakfast together too. But every night we're at the table eating together with there are some exceptions, but it's pretty rare. It's like 6 nights a week. And we have discussions, and we're talking about sometimes heavy things, sometimes just the day, and sometimes topics are really random. But my wife and I are consistently saying, wait, Annalise, it's not your turn. Haley was still talking. Okay, Haley, what was the rest you're going to say? Because what happens is this unconscious part of us, I was talking about the mind part. Well, that's the unconscious part of us. That is the unbelievable connection between your conscious self, your body, your feelings, your emotions, and the unconscious and the spirit world, the energy, whatever it is, the outside of us, that we get these thoughts that are outside of us, and we get these connections with other people that are kind of outside of us. And if you don't allow that unconscious part of us to be engaged, then the quality of what you're sharing, the quality of what you're thinking decreases significantly, and you might even say exponentially. So if I make the promise that I won't interrupt and that I will listen, I'm changing lives instantly. Like instantly, I'm changing lives. And men desperately need to learn how to do this, and they desperately need to be listened to, because there's people listening right now that have absolutely unbelievable, brilliant insights to share with people. If the people they're talking to would just shut the hell up and listen to them.
Right. Just shut up.
Just shut up. Let me finish what I have to say. And that's something that I think a lot of men have expressed in their own minds, and maybe even verbally expressed it. But it's a real, genuine, deep frustration, because we think, right? We think we're not. I think the way that men are depicted is like we've got these boxes and we only think in one thing at a time. That's stupid. We're freaking brilliant creatures. And if you give us the space to think and then share, you'd be shocked at what comes out of people, right? And even if they don't even seem like they have much to share, it's amazing what happens. So real quick explanation of what I mean by not interrupting. Words are obviously an interruption. That's obvious. That's clear. But so is the way you listen. Right? If I'm listening by leaning away, crossing my arms, or like tapping my foot or my hand, if I'm creating a distraction, then that distraction interrupts the person's thoughts. And therefore, you're not going to get the best thoughts out of them. That's like a car crash in your brain. Think of it as if you're having a conversation with me, and then your phone chirps, or you start drumming your fingers, or you look away at the stars or whatever. It's like all of a sudden my thoughts T-boned a car. And what happens to those thoughts? They're gone forever. So like you just lost your question for whatever. I don't know how you lost your question, but you did. And that's fine. But something happened. So your question something T-boned your question. Something distracted you and you lost your question. This happens all the time to people at home and in the workplace. So great leaders know how to listen deeply and create an environment for thinking.
Dude, yeah, I harp on just shutting up pretty heavily. Not just for me. For me, it's a little bit deeper than that, because I understand that there are people, especially the people I surround myself with intentionally, but in a lot of cases, the people I work with are so much smarter than me, or at least they seem like, to me, they're so much smarter than me. It's like, I need to shut up and just hear. I need to learn. And I think it's because I'm on, at least right now, such a learning journey. I just want to learn. I want to absorb as much as I possibly can every single day. I'm almost obsessed with it. And, this is kind of a new thing for me. It's not always been this way for me, but Yeah, definitely. You got to shut up because your team members are going to have insights into things that you as the leader miss every single day. And you're not going to know unless you shut up and just listen to them. But, and I got my question. This is a horrible segue into it. Um, would have been much better had the squirrel not ran by my window and completely distracted me. But talk to me a little bit about beating yourself up because there's a difference between beating yourself up and holding yourself to very strict accountability standards. What does that look like in your life? How do you make sure you're not just beating yourself to a bloody pulp, but you're still being very strict and holding yourself to the high standards you've set for yourself?
Yeah, this might be an interesting angle on this, but and and I hope it makes sense to everyone. I think it's the difference between guilt and shame. So guilt is I've done something wrong. Right? I've done something wrong here, and I promised I would do something I didn't do. I feel guilty about that. Guilt is a good thing. This is something that we can learn from, and we can use to our benefit. It's a healthy feedback mechanism. And I don't want to have a lot of guilt because I don't want to do a lot of wrongs. But when I experience that guilt, I immediately know that there's value there, that there's something good that's going to come from that because it's a good feedback mechanism. Shame is much more of a wicked internal / external feedback that doesn't lead us anywhere good. When I'm shaming myself, I'm beating myself up for the sake of beating myself up. Right. Well, I'm ashamed that I did this certain thing, or I'm ashamed of who I am, or ashamed of the way I approached this, or ashamed of my results. And the shame is how do you describe what shame feels like versus what guilt feels like?
I would say shame is just soul crushing, depressing. Guilt just makes you, it's like a upset stomach
Yep.
almost
Yep.
for me. Shame just feels like the weight of the world is on top of me.
Yeah. Guilt knocks you down for a moment, but ultimately is here's the metaphor. It's the difference between all of the mistakes that we make being the mountain that we climb up on top of, which is how guilt helps us through. Like it's the feedback mechanism where we feel bad about something, we learn from it, we grow, we're building on top. Shame is you're buried underneath all that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you're drowning and you can hardly breathe. Right. So just think about the difference. Like guilt is much more fleeting and it's short-lived because you can quickly do something about it. Shame weighs us down for a long time. So that's the way that I look at it. And I've basically tried to remove as much of the shame side of things as possible. And I'm always going to make mistakes, right? So there's going to still be some guilt, but let me get rid of that shame.
Yeah, I was about to ask, like, do you still experience shame? I'm sure you do, but what in the instances you do, how do you get that shame and transform it into guilt or just completely push that shame away permanently?
Yeah. So I think we'll bring it back to the original question to make sure we don't confuse folks. Shame meaning feeling bad for myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? That will never serve me well. That's not going to serve me well to feel bad for myself. How can feeling bad for myself help me move forward? If I make a mistake and it hurts me, or I get confused, or I'm frustrated with myself, that's good. I can learn from all that. But if I just feel bad for myself or who I am, or like I look at myself and I'm like, well, you're a loser, you suck. How is that ever going to serve me?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So do I do that? Yes. do I look at myself sometimes and be like, who are you to talk about the stuff we're talking about right now? Or what experience do you have? Or look at this guy. He's got way more experience than you do. How can you be helpful or whatever? Right. You start to beat yourself up and shame yourself because you don't have what you think it takes or whatever. But that's never going to serve me. So instead, if that comes, then I'm going to quickly go, wait, what's the real message here? What's the real message here? Right. Which is, what can I learn from it? What can I learn from you? What is this reflecting about my current life situation? those types of things.
Right. Yeah. I think and for me, the key there is just identify it. Everything becomes a whole lot easier once you have clarity from identifying what you're facing actually is. And so, I mean, and my metaphor for that, it's not really a metaphor, I guess, but in the military, we're taught, we have to, when we're in combat, we have to be able to communicate to the higher chain of command exactly what our battlefield looks like. And so you have to be able to identify your enemy opposed from your good guys. So, I mean, just identification, you get so much clarity from it. I have such a great message. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you going on that little side journey with me. I apologize. The segue was just absolutely horrible because I forgot what I wanted to ask. But I think that's a huge thing because especially men, I think men are the worst about it is we just wreck ourselves sometimes. I know women do too. I'm not singling women out, but I think men are a little more prone to it. And we lose the promotion, or we don't make enough money, or the kids need something that we can't provide, and we just tear ourselves up.
Right. Shame looks like this. You can't see, the people can't see me, but it's shoulder slumped, head down. Right. And if you've ever tried to have a conversation with somebody or try to be confident in this posture, it's not going to happen. This is what shame looks like, right? It's this closed, small posture. And when you start to present yourself or see yourself in a small way, your thinking and your ability to solve problems and your ability to be emotionally healthy is shrunk completely. And that's a whole nother topic of like the way you hold yourself matters and all that kind of stuff. But really, shame does that to you. It crushes you. It pulls everything in. Whereas on the other side, when you're learning from mistakes and you're like, man, I feel bad about doing that, it actually lights you up a little bit. You're like, wait a second, I messed up over there. Instead of feeling shame and smashing your body in, you're like, man, I got to fix that. And you kind of pick yourself up, and it's more of a pride position, not the negative pride, but a pride position of, no, you know what? I'm going to get through this. I'm going to improve. And that type of attitude is a much more open posture, and your thinking is better, and your progress and your efforts are going to be better too.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, this has been such a powerful conversation. I appreciate it so much. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but before we go, I would love for you to just share how people can find you, get a hold of you, get your blue shirt framework, and of course, plug your book real quick too as well.
Yeah, so a few ways you can get a hold of me. Blueshirtcoaching.com is my website. You can find me there. I have a Facebook group called, what's it called? Blue Shirt Business Community. Sorry, Blue Shirt Business Community. So just search that out on Facebook, and it's business owners. We're working together to help each other learn and grow and all those types of things. And then on Alignable, there's a group called Dads in Business. And so check that group out. And then finally, the book is called Right Now Leadership, a 4-part framework for today's leaders. And several of the things I've talked about today have come from that book. Other things haven't, but several have. And I expound on it a bit more, and there's a ton of mindsets and habits in there that people can implement right now, because that's what we can do. The only thing we can do is right now. Can't do anything from the past or for the future. Only thing we can act on is right now. So
absolutely, 100%. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, as always, scroll down to the bottom of the bio or the show notes, whatever platform you're on, just go to the bottom. All his links are going to be there. Make sure you bounce over there and give him tons and tons of love. Get that book. It's going to be a great start to your year. And of course, once you're done doing that, head over to renownedleadership.com, click on the book now link, get a free chat with me, because you know me, I need all the love, people. Give it all to me right now. Like Kyle said, right now. But again, Kyle, this has been just such a powerful conversation. I truly appreciate it. And we're going to have you back again because I want to continue this conversation. It is intriguing. And man, I had a great time, brother.
Thank you. Me too, Stephen. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Oh, wait, I almost forgot. Man, I am struggling tonight with the squirrels. Kyle, all my guests, they get the pleasure of having the final word of wisdom on my show. So my final question to you is, what advice do you have for people to lead like a champion?
Yeah, it's actually tied to the listening, which is if you're going to listen well, you got to ask questions well. So get really good at asking open-ended questions. Ask questions that start with what. Try to take your day, the rest of today or tomorrow, and ask questions that start with what, instead of questions that lead to a yes or no answer or that are binary. Open-ended questions open people's minds. So ask open-ended questions, and that is what great leaders do.
I agree 100%. That is great advice. All right, so now I can end it. So as always, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed Kyle's input. I found it just insanely helpful and enlightening. And yeah, so that's going to wrap it up this week.